how do you tell like a strong, independent woman not to like trust her gut?
There was a metaphor that we used that Neem was the energy of a person, Nadim was the brain, and I was the heart.
Starting a company is essentially like starting a family. You have to have all those difficult conversations.
I have two co-founders.
Yeah.
One is also my life partner, and the other one is a business partner.
Right.
So already there are many sort of layers in there, right? Chemistry is super important. I wouldn't compromise on it.
The vibe check.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it will take you through the dark moments, dark nights. One practical thing that we did, which we called Co-Founders Marriage Agreement, we came together. It was at the very beginning where we said, let's explore whether we want to do this together. So we said, what would be some of the key guiding principles that would navigate our relationship?
So much could be resolved if we just sort of laid it out on the table instead of just holding it in and just brooding about it.
You have to take a little bit of an ego away.
As amazing as your synergy is, there must be moments where you're seeing a different end goal. How do you add method to that madness? Hi, and welcome back to She Talks Business with me, your Karachi host, Khizra Munir. And today I have a very special guest. We have Vladimira Briestenska.
Well done.
Okay, that was perfect. Vladimira is from Slovakia.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm getting all of this information perfectly. I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I am really looking forward to picking your brain. And I'm pretty sure people are really excited to hear about your experiences. And I'm going to dive right into it.
Okay.
So, Vladimira, tell me, why and how did you decide to establish a business in Pakistan?
So I am also, I think there's like a joke around it that till date I have done a number of podcasts and the ones in Pakistan and now also outside of Pakistan, they all start with the same question.
Because
But
like Pakistan is
know.
like the last
I
place you
know.
think of, maybe, potentially. We're just not like a romantic, glamorous place to go
No, I hear.
put down roots.
I think there is certainly a lot in there that you don't, as a Slovak white woman who grew up in the 14,000, we called it a city, but then when I came to Pakistan and realized that when 14,000 inhabitant village of sorts, or there's that joke I always say is the size of a wedding in Pakistan.
Yes, oh my God.
Yeah, so it does sort of bring or raises eyebrows and bring questions for people. It wasn't on my radar either. But when I sort of, in my career journey, which was not narrow in any way, it was very colorful.
Yeah.
One thing that I knew was that I did wanted to live in emerging markets. Okay. And I think that I had that experience before, living a little bit in Africa, not for too long, a few other countries. And then when the opportunity came, which was about 6 years ago, to come to Pakistan, I remember the moment I was living in Prague at that time with my first husband. And I remember sort of getting a phone call from my current husband, who at that time was a business partner. And he said that, look, there's this opportunity to scale a financial wellness business in Pakistan. I know that you care about tech and tech used for scaling impact solutions.
Yeah.
And you love emerging markets. Pakistan combines all of it.
Yeah.
Do you want to come?
Yeah.
And I remember there was a very quick decision. I obviously checked at home how they feel about it. I think they didn't know how to feel about it because we knew very little about the country.
Yes.
But it felt good down there in the guts.
And how do you tell like a strong, independent woman not to like trust her gut?
That's another thing.
Yeah.
So I followed it.
Yeah.
And I came and it was a very quick, I would say, love affair in all lenses. Love affair first with the country and with really why I came, with the purpose of building a business. But when I came, it wasn't with the idea that, hey, I'm going to build a business in Pakistan. It was with the idea of, I've learned something abroad in my career previously. There is a venture that needs help. There are some people that are keen to collaborate. Can I help?
Right.
One of the biggest fears that I had, and I said this to Nadim, who was the person who called me, and my current business partner and life partner, I said, what can I offer as the white woman coming to Pakistan, helping to think about some cultural aspect for the company and scaling the vision? I said, I know very little. Like, this will feel very odd for people. So it felt intimidating.
Right.
But the moment when I came, I sort of made this dialogue with myself. I said, I can do one thing. Either I come with this attitude of like, I sort of know it all.
Yeah.
And I was also aware of the layer of my color, of my skin.
Yeah.
And I think there was a little bit of an assumption that people might look at you like, oh, you've been in US and Europe and you have all these experiences, so look up to you. And I didn't want that because it's just, I think it's wrong on many, many sort of points. And so when I came in, I tried to come in with this mindset of like, I have some of my experiences, of course, but you are my counterparts.
Right.
You know your space. You know your experiences, lived experiences. You know your people. Can we work together? Yeah. And that's what I said on the first meeting. I said that to Fakhr, who was my counterpart at that time in the company. And I think he did like it. And it worked. So from there, the whole journey sort of started.
I like how you very politely said that I didn't want to come and white-splain your own culture to you.
Yeah.
And I think it was the perfect approach to take while coming here. It sounds like finding the right co-founder is a lot like finding the right partner. And we will get into that eventually because you seem to have found both. And it's a relationship that can make or break the entire future of your potential company, your potential startup. How does one find the right co-founders? Because you, for the most part, have found the right co-founders.
Yeah. So, no, very important, good questions. I feel like we don't ask that question enough or spend enough energy or time to actually distilling like how much energy you should put into defining with whom you are going to build business, because we do call it that there is a marriage co-founder agreement, or people sort of joke about it. It's a relationship which equals or sort of is a parallel to a marriage. And I think there is something in there. So in my case, maybe just continuing the journey, right? So I have in the business that we have built in Pakistan, which is called Neem, is the Neem tree. I currently have, I don't think it's going to change. I have 2 co-founders. Yeah. One is also my life partner, and the other one is a business partner.
Right.
So already there are many sort of layers in there, right? With the current life partner, so with Neem, he was the person who I knew. So we know each other for about 11 years right now. We've had a very solid foundation of being very good friends and business partners before. So we worked together professionally. The other co-founder came into the journey when sort of in the first year of being in Pakistan. The reason why I'm sort of going through that analogy of how we knew each other is that, or how we found each other. For me, having the foundation with Neem was very important, because I think we figured out that there was a lot in common in terms of the mission and purpose of how we wanted to approach and the problem and sort of the solution, how we wanted to build. The other co-founder that came in, Neem, which is also Neem and building Neem.
Yeah.
But it has its system. He very much beautifully fit in. And I think we spent the first half a year really going deep into knowing each other. Because it's suddenly from duo, we were a triangle, right?
Yeah.
It was the 3 of us. And with these layers of being life partners, because sort of our relationship sort of evolved with Neem, and then that was also something that Neem was aware of, but we also had to sort of tackle together, because obviously it creates questions and potentially fears.
Because
am I
he
going to be
might
left
feel
out?
outnumbered,
Absolutely.
or like, is this an
Absolutely.
ambush?
Yeah. I think it's very real.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's a real concern, but it's a real question to ask.
I mean, it's a natural consideration. How will this affect the dynamic of decision making?
Yeah. So hence, because we were aware that that's it, but that was not the only reason, of course. I mean, whether you have this type of dynamic in the co-foundership or you are business partners solo, I think it's super important that you ask yourself the bigger question and you start from, are we aligned on the value system? And that's where we started.
Yeah.
So we started actually on the value system in terms of what really matters to us on professional and human level. And is that something that aligns? And the moment when we realized that that's where we very much sink in as three people, as three business partners, the fact that, let's say, personalities might be a bit different and we have very complementary experiences that come together, that's a benefit. But if the foundation around the values would not sort of fit in as a puzzle, I think that's where it breaks. But again, like I remember we've had the number of conversations, because it was actually during COVID, like we've had a number of calls just asking very honest, raw, sometimes uncomfortable, actually often very uncomfortable questions to each other in terms of like, how are you thinking about this? And why do you really want to do this, right? Yeah. How are you thinking about potentially exiting? Like, are you committed for a certain time frame, like for a number of years, etc.? Do you have something else? Learning about families. So you go deep. And I would recommend everyone to do that. Not just sort of being like, hey, you want to build this marketplace? Yeah, I want to. Let's do it together.
Yeah, because with starting a company is essentially like starting a family, and you have to have all those difficult conversations. So tell me, there's three of you. What dynamic does each person bring to the table? Like, there's one is the sort of one is the peacemaker. One is the antagonist, or I mean, not even an antagonist, but one person is like the really like go-getter. One is the let's take it slow. One is the, let me just mediate and bring this together. What part do each of you play in this trio?
So we do have some of these characteristics, but at the same time, I think what I really love about us is that if you ask this question to any of us, I think we would probably answer the same way, is that we really hate to be boxed. So we are very fluid as a trio, as people. Okay. So what I mean by that is that one of my co-founders or myself, I can take a role of being the glue and being the peacemaker, but also taking the sort of in another setting where needed. I take the role of, okay, here's the masculine energy. Like I leave the feminine, which is nurturing and bringing team together. Yeah. I use that in a different setting. Yeah. And the next one where the masculine is needed, let's say with a, I don't know, conversation with an investor, which is difficult. Yeah. Then I'm there. So we certainly have that. And I think that's something that I really enjoy about all three of us. But in terms of maybe the different traits, because there is a complementarity, I think if I speak about Neem, he comes from very much deep spiritual world, and he brings this energy with him to the team, and I think that's what the team really reflects also a lot about him, and the vibes and energy. So when he comes in, the room really lights up, and he's somewhere in the clouds, and that's where he's thinking, and it's a big picture, and he just sort of he allows you to forget often about the daily struggles and sort of think about the bigger perspective, and that there is something bigger than yourself. Okay. And that's really beautiful. And then there's Neem, who comes with this very strategic, product-led, tech-led mind, and he has this 35 years in financial services, and he's been an investor and philanthropist and an entrepreneur before, and he comes and he's sort of a cutthroat in one way, and he's in that way very practical as well, whilst he's also strategic, but I think already very different energies together, right? And then I think my energy, if I would say as a complement to those three, is it probably comes from the place of nurturing and bringing things together. Yeah. Because I think that's what we also understood, that's what we needed, and a lot of the foundation for us at Neem, that's where it starts. It starts from the human element. Yeah. And I bring that into the conversation of any kind or into the dynamics. So I think there was a metaphor that we used that Neem was sort of the energy of a person, Nadim was the brain, and I was the heart. That's sort of how we used it.
Oh, that's perfect. You've actually like captured it perfectly. So tell me a little about how Neem works, what exactly Neem's mission is, and what it aims to sort of achieve. And then based on that, how did each of you decide what role you would play in Neem?
So the vision of Neem is to help sort of bridge the financial inclusion gap in Pakistan. We do it in a quite unique way, which is that we support other digital businesses in Pakistan who already have thousands and millions of customers.
Sure.
And that's across, you can think about healthcare, education, logistics, any industry. And they want to start providing financial services or financial wellness products to their end users, so their consumers. So our financial wellness products, whether that's payments or lending, is not provided to you as an end consumer. You would not see a Neem marketed anywhere on a billboard or anything. But you would use Neem products, for instance, when you use a certain mobility app or a certain telehealth medicine app. On the back of that telemedicine app is Neem financial wellness product. So we empower other businesses so that they can sort of provide financial inclusion products to their users. It's called embedded finance in the industry. There's a telehealth medicine in Pakistan, a major brand, Sehat Kahani. I don't know if you can say it. Yes,
course,
okay,
absolutely.
beautiful. So
Sehat
Sehat Kahani has a 1.5 million patients. They also have rural clinics across Pakistan. And what we are now trying to partner with them is that Sehat Kahani is collecting fees for all the so for when the patient come to the clinic. So there's they get the treatment, right? So they're paying for the treatment to Sehat Kahani. So what we are trying to help them is to collect digital payments, right, from the patient. So that's one thing that we are helping the founders of Sehat Kahani and Sehat Kahani as a business. And that's digital payments. We are now venturing out into earned wage access, so an advanced salary product. So a lot of employers in Pakistan who are concerned about the financial well-being of their employees we are embedding our product into sort of their payroll or their cycle, so they can provide it to their employees. So it's both on the payment side and then earned wage access. It's not very much a loan, but sort of a financial wellness product.
Sure.
So that's sort of the high level vision. The idea is that we believe that we can support other businesses who already have millions of customers with those financial wellness products, rather than us going and acquiring every individual at the time.
I think that makes more sense. You save time and energy on the acquisition and just go directly to the source.
Absolutely.
And what role do each of you play in that?
So I think there was a very interesting conversation at the start, because you've got three people. Whilst we are you could say, the spirit and the brain and the heart, we also are very alpha personalities. All three of us. Of course. So when we were defining the roles, I think at the start we went back into, hey, what do you know, right? Like you sort of look back into your career and your experience previously, and that sort of naturally sort of leads you towards some boxing. So I think at the beginning, I took the area around people, because that was something that I was good at. I've done before. Neem sort of took, because he knew Pakistan really well, he took the area around partnership. Nadeem was sort of always around the product and tech. So it was quite natural division.
Okay.
However, over time, and that's when I think it got really interesting, is that we started realizing that one, it's more fluid. So whilst we have leads in certain areas, we kept those. There were edges which become more fluid. And what I mean by that is that you realize that, for instance, if I use my own example, I never really wanted to be boxed within a space of just, hey, this is just the people area is my area. I wanted to go a little bit more towards the product. I was always interested in the governance and, let's say, investor relations, and even though those were new areas, and that required for us quite a lot of conversation, because we started stepping into sort of areas that we defined for ourselves at the first place, and that was I think one of the first time where we also took external help to help us sort of mediate that conversation, in terms of to say it's okay to reshuffle. And what I mean by that, to reshuffle your roles and responsibilities a little bit, play with it, even though you might be already maybe 2 years into the business.
Okay.
And I think that's something that I've seen with many co-founders or founders in general, is that sometimes we feel that I take a role of a COO or someone takes a role of CEO whilst they're, let's say, co-founder or CTO. Some roles are maybe more natural, like CTO for a lot of people. That's sort of where they stay for a long term. But some other roles, people venture out of those or want to explore something else, and it only happens over time. So I think often what I've seen is that we get boxed within a frame and is like, okay, I'm COO forever.
Yeah.
And that's what might feel often very limiting, and it does require sort of a proper reflection and open communication, like even being able to allow each other as co-founders to say, do you think like I could come into the other area? I think I could be good at that.
Yeah.
So that was important. And maybe it sounds simple, but when you have people who already sort of are settled into the roles, and one of the co-founders says that I might not feel comfortable in the seat, or I want something more or something different, not always that easy.
I think that makes sense. And I think that's where, and this is the perfect segue into what I wanted to ask, 3 different founders, 3 different personalities. Nadeem is a strategic guy. He's the brains. Neem is the
spirit,
the soul, the spirit, and you're the heart.
Yeah.
How does that factor into you defining the culture of what your startup is going to feel like as an experience? And I'm very interested to know that, because startups in Pakistan have it's a very polarizing space, because the founders are very like stressed out because you have investors and you're constantly like hustling because you have to keep moving forward. You have to send your investors that proof of concept, that evidence that we're constantly hustling, and that trickles down to your employees also, that trickles down to your teams. How do you and we're talking about like founder wellness also. I mean, I know that we're going to get into that, because that's an area that's important to you. How do you guys decide what the culture of your startup is going to, or your company is going to be?
I think we were very, very clear about, again, the value system that we want to build on from very early on, very like day zero. And the fact that we can sort of utilize this Zen brain heart, that played really nicely into it. Like there was no conflict whatsoever. I think because we are, all 3 of us, we are not first-time entrepreneurs. And whether we've built businesses before, or we invested into businesses, or we sort of supported, let's say through accelerators and stuff, we've seen different cultures, how it works, how it doesn't work. We've had our own experiences. And I remember this conversation at the very beginning where we said that this time around, we want to do it our own way.
Yeah.
And our own way meant we want to do it with people where we feel that we can have good relations. I know we often say that you shouldn't try to build a family, and we don't try not to use that language in the culture, but we wanted to at least be able to have some level of friendships within the company.
Build a culture people want,
where you want to come in, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you spend
That's very important.
so much time.
Absolutely.
We all do at the company. So I think what we certainly wanted to avoid was like to minimum any type of politics. That was something that we wanted to put aside. Backstabbing. We knew that we wanted to build a culture which has a major level of transparency in communication, even to the level which might feel uncomfortable at times.
Yeah.
But we sort of learn and train that muscle. We knew that we want to build a culture which encourages, but this trickles from leadership and from us, which encourages a lot of self-awareness. And I think that's the communication bit and the self-awareness, I think, are 2 core pillars for our culture.
Could you give me an example
Sure.
of how that works? How that played a part in a decision you guys had to make, or something you had to implement?
Very recently, we were trying to figure out what can seem like a very simple element of a culture, but is like timings. Timings for like starting time for our sort of company, right? And for our employees. And there was this conundrum, this clash of like, you want to give a high freedom, high responsibility. Sort of that's the leading principle you want to go with. But at the same time, we were seeing the reality, which was that people were, let's say, coming late, and we were questioning, and we were like, how is it possible? Like, we empower people, we discuss it, everyone is clear, we have a clear communication. So we sat down, and I do remember that we had different sort of approaches to this. One of us was of the view that we should still sort of give more trust in the empowerment. We should lead with the empowerment and let people sort of be more free. And it's more about the result-oriented culture. And then there was the other approach, which was within three of us, within the co-founders, which was that actually, you know what, like there are some guiding principles that we need to turn into rules, and potentially even explore the optionality of not a punishment, but there is some sort of a what's the word in English? That when you break a rule,
you have to be penalized.
You have to be penalized. Thank you so much. I mean, the penalization or being penalized doesn't even operate within my vocabulary in some way. So that was a clash. And we were sort of trying to explore. We brought in also our people and culture team. We've had that conversation. We came to a place where we sort of found a way in the middle where we were saying that, hey, we're going to give some sort of concrete guidance to the people. We're going to introduce some penalization, like tracking mechanisms, which I personally hated. And we introduced this to the team in sort of our circle, like a team circle. And I remember the team, because actually it was smaller circles, we allowed the team to feedback on the on this new policy. The team had also a variety of different reactions, and they pushed back as well. And I remember that we took it back into the founders' room. Not that we have a room, but it's quote unquote founders' room. And I remember us it was really within a day to another, exploring together whether we are okay to hear the voice of the team, let go of the sort of a strong voice, which was within the founders, which is that actually, you know what, we should have a strict rule. We should have a penalized sort of mechanism. And we stepped away from it and followed the sort of voice of the team and came back to the team. And we were very sort of authentic and said that, hey, whilst it felt like maybe we propose something to you guys, and it takes also you have to take a little bit of an ego away to be able to come to the team and to say, we are going to follow the voice and we hear you. Exactly. And so all that said, so there was a sort of a scenario, but within that, there was a multiple conversation between three of us where the different energies came together, where the energy of the much more rules-oriented and is like, enough is enough, versus, you know what, let's trust our people more. We'll sort of figure it out on the go, right? And there is something about the empowerment. That was really interesting. And it was a push and pull.
Yeah.
I think what it also requires is a big level of trust that sort of happened at that time, that one of the co-founders then said, okay, I hear you guys. I've heard the team. I let go. And I think that often if you don't work on yourself, maybe that's the principle of self-awareness comes in, that if you don't work on yourself and you are not able often maybe in such situation to step away and to figure out that you do have two other co-founders and that you have a voice of a team, often founders just push through, or it's the ego that pushes through, right?
That makes sense.
So I think it's that questioning the ability to push and pull within each other and be very raw and honest and say, hey buddy, maybe now you are not pushing from the right place of,
but also being able to get onto the same level as the wider team and understand their perspective also. Yeah.
And or be even within the co-founders conversation being the representative of that voice, right?
Yeah.
If sometimes we forget about that voice.
Yeah.
So that's also what comes into the play.
It's so interesting. You've told me the different dynamics of all three founders, and when you were telling me this anecdote, I was constantly
see
like,
it, or
who did what? It's probably Nadeem. So that's
let that for listeners too.
I know. So that's the fun part. Like I can see people trying to figure it out. As amazing as your synergy is, there must be moments where you're seeing a different end goal, or you're seeing the journey to that goal differently. And so how do you sort of add method to that madness?
So you know what? I mean, we have much less to any type of conflict on or tension on the bigger vision. And I think that's because that's really where that was why we started at the first place.
Yeah.
And we very often we have opportunities, but we also remind ourselves that that's why we are here. And it's really driven by something bigger than ourselves, by impact. However, sort of it might sound, it really is truly for three of us. So when we have founder retreats, founder forums, something bigger comes out, or investor questions, I never have doubted that the answer about the bigger vision would be different if I say Neem or Neem. That sort of always has been strong alignment between three of us. The piece where more, let's say, tension comes in is the how, is the path. So the why stays. We're very clear about that. The how we get there, that has introduced many more.
How do you figure that out? Because I think what I'm trying to say is that you come from a whole different body of experience. Neem comes from a whole different body of experience, and Nadeem also comes from a whole different body of experience. You guys probably see the path differently, and each path is probably legitimate and valid. How do you then zero in on which path to take?
Yeah, I think there are two things. One is hours of conversations.
Yeah.
Hours.
And the pros and
deep
cons?
dives, definitely. We bring in also, so one, we bring our own voices, and we create a very protected space to have those deep dives, to have those explorations, to have those conversations. It's not something we fudge. The other thing is that we also learn to understand who leads where. So whilst I would say we are fluid, we do have our areas of leadership or expertise, if I say that.
Where one of you would be like, okay, this person, I'm going to step back a bit because I know this person knows more than me.
Yes. However, there is still quite a big level of responsibility on that lead within three of us. So let's say if there is something around investors governance, I bring it in, but there is a responsibility for me to make a pretty good case. It's not like, hey, I know my space, and because I lead this at Neem, you guys have to just trust me blindly. No. There's like, I bring a good case, it's the guys question me, we have a conversation, but yes, there's a sort of additional level of trust that she knows that space more because that's where she operates,
Absolutely.
Right? So I think it's the protected space to have the deep dives. Then there is the leadership within these respective areas. I would say that there is a third layer, and we bring in third voices. We've been lucky over the years that we have built a pretty amazing network of advisors, and they, as well as investors, actually. I mean, we touch wood, it's more often is not the case that investors become also sort of your advisors, and very authentically.
Also, although it does appear like that would be part and parcel. I mean,
I wish that would be the case.
Really?
I think in most cases the investors are rather the stressors for a lot of founders.
Really, I feel like from my experience of like my layperson experience of watching Shark Tank, and like them sort of investing the sort of consideration of the founder in choosing an investor or choosing one of the sharks is how much good advice can I get from this shark?
Sure.
So.
Sure, that element is of course there.
In real life.
I think that dynamic is also there, but there is also a very strong power dynamic.
Yeah.
That the founder is relying on a financial investment, financial support from an investor.
Yes.
And when you are a founder in a market like Pakistan, you don't have the luxury of choosing from a major array of investors, right?
Absolutely.
So often, especially now, think about being a first-time founder and you are out there, and there are a lot of those sharks. Many of them are not sharks, actually. And there are some really awesome, conscious, human investors as well,
Yeah.
right? So not to put them all into the same bracket. But yes, I came across, even as a serial entrepreneur, as someone who's been in this space, I've came across of situations where we talked to an investor and the investor made my CFO to his chewing gum literally dissolved from stress during the call.
Wow.
That's how bad the call was by the investor, like how rude he was, how aggressive he was to us. I couldn't believe it. And it happened in the last, it was like 3 years ago, 2.5
Wow.
years ago. Yeah, that was a big one. And we were aware to the level of our value system, luckily, and, you know, self-aware and experience, that we were able to respond in a way to say, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And we are putting a boundary. And we went back to the investor and said, we don't want to engage any further. And we said why, right? That there was a misalignment in terms of how we were treated and the value system and everything. But now imagine you have a first-time founder, you have a minority founder, right? Who is just trying to figure this out. And you come across someone who is aggressive. And not that all investors are aggressive, but there are many instances where the power dynamic of like, hey, I'm here to give you money. And so you are here.
I know what I'm talking about.
You are here
I've done
at
this
my
so many
service.
times.
Yeah. I've been told that you should be happy that I'm giving you my time.
Yeah.
And I said, but this is a two-ways relationship, right? So not always easy, but I know we sort of deteriorated a little bit into this space. I could speak hours about the dynamic of investors and
but
founders.
I feel like so I think what I'm curious about is, I think in situations where there are 2 or more founders, I don't think everybody gets as lucky as you probably have gotten in terms of having people that you have that chemistry with, that you could communicate, the open communication. So if someone were to approach a situation like that, are there any frameworks that they could approach in sort of establishing a good work relationship, but also one that is effective but has boundaries and is respectful?
Yeah.
How does that, like in technicality, how does that work if like you're not sort of vibing together?
Yeah.
But you are the right people for this.
But I would say if you don't vibe with someone, probably not the right co-founder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is,
I mean, it's just because you're going to spend so much time with the person and it's going to be tough. So if you, I mean, it depends what people understand under vibing with someone.
Yeah.
But I think if the chemistry doesn't work, the similar as in your relationship, when you're looking for a partner, like if the chemistry is not there, even though on the paper, you might be beautiful like pair.
Yeah.
I don't think would work, right?
But what about in a place like Pakistan, where again we acknowledge that there isn't a lot to choose from, and you found someone who is willing to be your co-founder because you both know what you want to do with this product or this tech solution or the solution you're bringing.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
You're both really important and valid, and I've seen this. I've seen this like toxic marriage of like 2 co-founders who are like thriving and perfect and like killing it, but like just their dynamic together is just like mom, dad.
But maybe you said it, mom, dad vibes together, right? Yeah. But the fact that maybe it's more of an Italian household, okay, that's their style, right? Yeah. But I think some level, I think I'll come to actually answering your question, because I think it was a brilliant question in terms of like, is there any framework, right? But I do feel that the alignment in terms of first of all, on the values, and then some sort of a level of chemistry, I would say it's sort of a must. Let's say that's the 0 level. Yeah. And then you build on it, right? So one thing that I really would like to sort of maybe unpack a little bit was a practical thing that we did, which we called Co-Founders Marriage Agreement. Okay. We renamed it later to Co-Founder Relationships Agreement, just that we are actually, because a therapist, we'll get to this, told us that maybe it's not a marriage, you shouldn't use that concept. But anyhow, so we came together and we said, it was at the very beginning. It was during the first 6 months of the relationship where we said, let's explore whether we want to do this together, and we can, and we fit together, right? So we said, what would be some of the key guiding principles that would navigate our relationship? And actually, if you don't mind, I took it with me. I have the phone here because I wanted to actually even read some of that areas for you, because I think it's pretty awesome. And
do it.
We established it like over more than 3-4 years ago, and we still come back to those.
It's like your Bible.
Totally. And we signed it. Like literally at the end of it, we said we are all committing to this, and we have it signed, and we have it on our Notion. Married, the stamp. But so some of the areas that it talks about is, for instance, we talk about the communication, right? So here's an area which says frequent and honest communication. But we are specifically within it, we are saying that, for instance, we come up with issues before they rise up to a conflict.
Okay.
So we know that we are expecting from each other that if I felt uncomfortable by my co-founder doing something during a meeting, rather than me bottling it inside, I'll find a way, even though, again, it might be uncomfortable for me to address the other person, right? Because that might be, let's say, my weakness, not necessarily, or not strength. We commit to each other that we will bring it up before I completely freak out on another meeting. And the root cause might be, let's say, something that happened 2 weeks ago, right? So that's sort of one principle that we commit to. We commit to each other for regular, honest, and candid feedback that we give and receive to each other. Simple. And we practice this. Then we ask ourselves, after we sort of sign those principles, that how do we do this? So we went into operating principles, which I'll tell you about. But the other areas which are really interesting, for instance, is business before the ego. So what that means is an area, we, for instance, said that we ruthlessly pursue self-knowledge in order to show up more balanced and self-aware in the co-founder relationship. So what we, for instance, said to each other is that there are certain things that you might, let's say, bring from home or from your past. Baggage, there you go, that you need to work on. Don't bring it always on the table of the co-founders. It's okay. It is a safe space, but there are also boundaries. I think we understood that we are not each other's therapist as well.
Absolutely.
We hear each other. We are there for each other. And that's another principle, that we support ourselves on a personal level as well. But there are boundaries. And there have been cases where we said, I hear you, but I can't help you with this. And we recommend it to each other. Maybe it would be useful for you to get support somewhere else, and then come back and let's see whether you are in a better place to actually address the issue that we are trying to address together as co-founders.
Okay.
And I think that's super important, because otherwise sometimes the co-founder relationship can be treated as you're going to wash any laundry here. That's not the space for it, right? There are boundaries. So those are just some. There are a few more areas in here, but coming to your questions.
But you've perfectly answered my question. I was curious that everything right now is sort of abstract and up in the air and sort of just intuitive and based on the relationship, but like everyone doesn't get that scenario. So I think this is a great idea, and that's exactly what I was curious about. And how much did each of you contribute to this? There's one person who's like, I will sort of make this sound like an actual contract. And one person's like, no, but this is important to me. So there must have been those conversations.
No, so in our case, I personally took a lead on, and I think you have to have someone within the relationship who sort of says like, okay, I'll take the lead, but I'll create the space for us, and then we co-create. So that's what happened. So I took a lead on saying, I think this would be important for us. Are you guys up for it? They were all up for it. We sat down together, and that's where we started sort of defining on piece of paper and on the wall what are some of the important areas for each one of us. We were seeing when there was an overlap, and when there was an overlap, that something stood out for us, right? Like, okay, this is non-negotiable. There were not that many areas which felt like areas of tension, where we would feel like someone says like, I really want this in the contract, and the others are like, no, this is completely outside of my world of value system. I think that was good. Again, it's a signal, like if your co-founder brings in something where it feels like it's violating your space, right? Or your values.
Sure.
I think it's a signal. So
Yes.
hence why I think it's super important to have that conversation early on.
Yeah.
And to ask those questions like, hey, what are the key important things for you in order to have a healthy relationship or healthy dynamics? And I think once you do that, that's when you realize whether there is an alignment, misalignment. Is it workable, not workable? Yeah, that's sort of what happened for us. And in our case, there was, hence why we are still together, there was a major overlap, very little outside. The other thing that I think is very important is that it doesn't stay a paper somewhere on a Notion or in a drawer. It's something that we
Go back to every day.
mostly in times of when, let's say, some conflict arises, and for instance, the value or principle of being respectful to each other.
Yes.
That's something that we come back to a lot.
Yeah.
And we say, hey, pause. Let's sort of reframe. Keep it respectful.
Yeah.
That's what we committed to each other.
So I know you're like the founder wellness, and that area is very important to you, and there's another initiative that you're involved with. Can you take us through that a bit?
Sure. So my journey in the entrepreneurship started by being sort of side-by-side entrepreneurs before I became one myself. So I observed a lot of dynamics between co-founders, but also just solo founders. And my role was supposed to be helping them to scale their businesses and connect them to the right people and think about business models, etc. What it came to when I had conversations one-on-one with those founders, most of the things they wanted to talk about was their personal journeys, what they were going through, the roller coaster. They wanted someone to listen, to just being able to have a safe space and being very honest about the experience they're going through.
Okay.
And so when that happened, that was many years back, I started asking. It was during the time when I was working within an investment fund. And I asked back with the team the question. I was like, what are we doing for the founders for the more human experience, personal experience? And we were not doing much.
Yeah.
And that was the time when we founded the Future Farm, which is a global organization which is trying to normalize and really demystify mental health, emotional health for founders and entrepreneurs.
Yes.
One of the things that I really found out years back is that even the ability to talk about the fact that it's tough to be a founder or to take this experience as an entrepreneur, as a life path, and that it has major impact on you as an individual, on your family, on your community, on your physical health. It's still something that people are maybe okay to talk behind the closed door, maybe to the best friend, maybe not even there, very little to the family. That's what I realized. Very little to your co-founders.
Like it's a very lonely space because
it is a lone space.
Because nobody except for any other founder will actually understand that experience. Your family will not understand that experience.
And your family often has a high expectations of you because I sort of remember a lot of cases of founders who pivoted from high profile corporate careers, right?
Yes.
They provided for their families and but they pivoted towards being a founder, which is a hustling, and suddenly your financial situation changes. And that's where your family actually, not necessarily intentionally, but becomes a place of stress because they have expectations for you to show up in the same way.
Have you made it big yet? Are you making money yet?
Absolutely. And then you come to layers like the wider ecosystem. You read all these news about glorifying the hustling and glorifying success, and suddenly you are there working night and day and trying to make something work, right? Yes. And a lot of the founders feel like failures, right? And they ask themselves like, can I share this with someone? Like, I can't really share this with an investor. Well, it's changing. That's the good news. But still to many investors, you can't really speak about the fact that you are going through depression or you are navigating, let's say, something at home, right? I mean, you feel that you might not be the prospect for the follow-on investment. So it is very lonely. It is very lonely. So hence, when with my other co-founder and Neem, so Neem and myself, we share 2 ventures together as co-founders, but there's also someone called Nectarius Lolios, who is a very experienced sort of ecosystem leader, and he
Yeah.
supported hundreds of founders over the many years. And we founded Future Farm really with that vision to say, it is okay.
Yeah.
Most of us go through this experience. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
So our flagship project is Naked Podcast. We
Yeah.
called it Naked because we wanted to be naked on it. Be naked about the experience
Yeah.
of also the darker sides. And the response has been really amazing and very warm. We've got a lot of messages regularly from founders from around the world just saying, it helps me to hear that someone else is going through a similar experience.
Yeah.
And we do talk also about the tools and the toolkits that people can use to navigate those situations. It's not hopeless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in terms of sort of actionable things that the Future Farm does, like that whole support system for founders, how do you make it actionable?
So as a Future Farm, our mandate is really raising awareness.
Yes.
So we are just one player within this wider set of other actors that come in, right?
Got it.
But what we do talk about is that, let's say when a founder talks about the experience of like how, let's say we had a founder who was talking about exit and how there is a big expectation around when you reach an exit and it can be a successful exit of your business, right? Financially, suddenly the founder fell into massive depression and complete loss of identity. And there was this expectation that when you sort of walk at the top of the hill, that's when all the glory comes, right? And you should have found yourself finally. And the founder was saying, that was sort of one of my lowest moments and I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
And so basically we go through the experience, we help other founders to potentially relate and not to feel lonely, that hey, something like this is okay and happens. And then we sort of navigate towards the second half, which is like, so how did you navigate that situation? What were some of the tools that you use? And we go through those, and there are multiple. People utilize, they build their own self-care system, whether that's going out and reaching out for help to someone like a founder's therapist. And that's a role that now is much more available, accessible to founders, to have someone with whom you can talk and who is experienced to take you through that experience and provide some guidance. Founders also talk about their sort of toolkit around self-awareness. So they invest a lot into knowing sort of how they get stressed, like what are the triggers that stress me, right? How do I energize on the other side, whether that's easy things. Some of them are very small. It's like having a walk regularly during the day, meditate, good physical sort of health, take care of your physical health, have a good sleep routine, have a support system of other founders, for instance. Out of all the people that we listed, where you feel like I can't really share with them my experience, other founders and people who have a shared experience, they, for most of the entrepreneurs, form a strong support system. So they go and they say, hey, I'm going through this. How did you navigate this? So that's also sort of the toolkit part, and we try to raise awareness about it. We put it out there to the world. We write certain blogs about it, but it's really about self-awareness and raising awareness
and normalizing the fact that as a founder you can struggle. Because I feel like when you reach that sort of, we really put the founder role on this pedestal where you feel like you can't show vulnerability or weakness. So I guess
that's
about
exactly
normalizing.
Absolutely.
So when you do the Naked podcast in Pakistan, how open and comfortable have Pakistan? So because there's so much stigma in Pakistan against like mental health situations, and it's looked at as like a handicap or a weakness. So how comfortable have local founders been in having these conversations with you on the Naked podcast, which is not like behind closed doors, or it's not like you and your therapist and like contractually you can't tell anyone because the podcast is public.
So Naked podcast covers global founders. Till date, we had 2 women founders from Pakistan. And they were very brave, brave. And I absolutely love their story. One was a ex-co-founder of Collabs, the co-working, and the other one is a current founder of Smartlane. Fatima Mazhar, yes. And the other one is Fatin, who co-founded Smartlane out of Lahore. They both had a very powerful story, and they were very brave and vulnerable, super vulnerable. That was
Right.
how they led. But to your question, so we've had two. It was really interesting to hear their experience around the feedback of the audience and people around them. They were saying that there were some people who were sort of a little bit disturbed by the level of honesty with which they shared the
Really?
experience. It was mostly people close to them, so often families.
Yes.
Like, why do you
It's a cultural
have to
issue.
bring this up
Yes.
publicly? I think it was also really interesting to hear that before they were going on to the podcast and sharing it with their friends, that they're going to talk about this, there were some friends that were sort of discouraging them, really sort of challenging them. Have you thought this through? Like, are you sure? Is this okay for you to go out with this to the public? Because this might potentially threaten, I don't know, your future investment, or it might show you in a different light that you are not that super strong, always strong founder, right?
There's also
So-
that perspective that you've already struggled and fought so many odds to be taken seriously as a woman founder, and to sort of expose your vulnerability would be validating people, be like, see, we said.
Might be, but that's why I even more really valued the fact that they
Yes.
came on
Yes,
the show,
absolutely.
and then they promoted it widely, and they stood
Yeah.
behind sort of that this is authentically what they went through, and they feel that it's super important to talk about it. But I think that generally in Pakistan, because I've been sort of people, the ecosystem or community knows that this is something that we have and we talk about.
Yeah.
The reactions have been positive, I must say. Whilst I agree with you that it's still early days in terms of normalizing the conversation.
Yeah.
Whenever I said that we are having those honest conversations, the ecosystem was like, oh, that's great. That's really important.
Yeah.
Like, they ask for more tools. They ask me further questions. So I feel it's coming probably from a place of shared experience. That's what I'm assuming. So whilst not many people might be ready to come on the show, I think I found quite a lot of alignment around, I know how this feels. So it's great that you guys doing something. I did, whilst it is not podcast, I've been invited to a lot of events to talk about it. So people are interested. So there's a certain level of curiosity and level of, that's great. And I have experienced some sort of parts of this myself. So I feel like that's a good start. We can build on this.
I feel like with all of this, you know, the Future Farm and the Naked Podcast and everything, do you sometimes feel like the therapist out of like all three of you
definitely.
founders?
Oh, and that's such a, thank you for bringing this up, because I said this to my co-founders, and I think it's a beautiful bridge to something I'll share, which is that we had a situation where there was a tension, there was a conflict arising. It was a little bit about reshuffling our roles. We talked about that before. And there was some sort of embedded assumption that Vladimira is going to design the whole session and be the mediator, while she also sits at her seat with the head of a co-founder. And I said, no, that doesn't work that way. Like, I don't want to be the therapist. I don't want to be the mediator. I want to play my role as a co-founder fully, right?
Yeah.
So I shared that with them. It wasn't actually intentional. I think they were coming from a place, you know how to do it.
Yeah,
You're good at this. So you'll guide and facilitate the
Yeah.
conversation. But it was the fact that I brought it up actually brought us or moved us to a point of venturing out and bringing into that conversation a third party. So we actually brought in a therapist who is experienced in working with co-founders and founders dynamics and founders themselves. And she helped us navigate through the conversation. And we've had that multiple times, and it was brilliant. And we loved it, all three of us.
That's what I was curious of, because I was like, and I think women are sort of forced into that role sometimes. We just sort of take it for granted, like, you know, she'll do it. Vladimira will do that part. We don't need someone else because she's so experienced in this area. So you know, I was thinking about it the whole time. I was like, you know, whether she likes it or not, the reshuffling, whatever the boundaries, the contract, but pretty sure the guys are making you play that role.
But I think then the responsibility is on us to say, you know what, I hear you, but no. Thank you, but no. Let's look for another way to sort of solve for
and
this.
That's also a really interesting sort of case study of how you addressed that situation where you've built this sort of rapport and this relationship with your co-founders where you could be like, instead of being like, why are they making me do this? Okay, fine, I'll do this. You were like, no, I'm not going to do it. I want to be co-founder. Like, I want to play my role. So I think that is a really important part. And I love that in this entire conversation, you're not the female co-founder. You're one of the co-founders. And I mean, I'm sure your co-founders have given you that that respect and that that position. But do you feel a different perception from like the external interactions where like,
sure,
and especially in Pakistan, like
not just in Pakistan,
okay, like,
and we can be
like, do you feel like people are talking to them and you're just like, hello, I'm standing here too?
Yeah, many times.
How does that, like,
so for me, I was like, let's start from home, meaning from home as a Neem, right? And so within Neem, I feel taken seriously, very comfortable. It's not something that would not require occasional conversation though.
Sure.
Right? So, but the fact that we are able to have a conversation about when our identity steps in and plays a role. And I think I just want to be also open about the fact that there are different layers of identity that sometimes maybe might discriminate us within certain situation, or put a certain lens by people on us. Gender is one, right? Age. I am the youngest of my two co-founders, but I also want to say that they are in their sort of late 50s.
Okay.
And I remember a situation when other external people looked at them with the lens of, do you have enough energy to do this? Right.
Oh, that's
whilst we know from research that the founders who are sort of more mature, like in their 45, I think was 45 plus, are more successful founders and stuff. Not that I need to defend them, but I think I wanted to say that internally from home, we've had occasional and multiple conversation about how our identity makes us feel comfortable, uncomfortable, or where that lens is useful, not sort of helpful, and how we would like with each other and with our team to navigate those, right? Now, when it comes to the external world, of course, I felt that, when I step into the room with those two senior men, as a woman, I am looked at differently. However, I think it's also important to say that in Pakistan, and we talked about this, I am aware that I'm stepping into the room as a white woman.
Yes.
And that already opens more doors for me. I had this conversation with another woman founder, Pakistani founder. We were sharing this experience, and she was really awesome in the way that she told me, honey, but when you come into the room as a white woman, they already treat you differently. I have to fire like 30 bullets before they see me. So that was also like, I was like, I hear you. And, here I am. I do remember that in the early days of building the business together and going out for meetings, and especially into, let's say, more corporate environments, being frustrated and literally in the car having these like tantrums for like half an hour and be like, why he didn't look at me, and I was ignored and everything.
Exactly.
And I do remember that for the guys, it was like, no, but you were there, like you were sort of holding your space. Like, why is this? So I had to also learn to find a way to share my experience authentically with them so they can relate, because it is different. It has improved for sure. I think it's also because I realized for myself, like, where are the situations where I really want to push and maybe change the situation. I also gain more, I guess, courage and self-confidence to step up and in certain situations, step up for myself and address it on the spot.
And I think that's very
language
important.
Absolutely. It is.
I feel like we
change the status quo.
So much could be resolved if we just sort of laid it out on the table instead of just holding it in and just brooding about it.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so Vladimir, if I was to look for a co-founder, what 3 things should I look out for?
Okay.
Like if I could only choose 3.
These questions of like the top 3
I know,
things.
this is an
But I
exam.
hear you. Okay. So 3 things that I believe would be important to look for.
Yeah.
I think we talked about at least 2 of them.
Yeah.
Which is someone with whom, first, let's start with the bigger why. That the reason why you want to build a business,
Yes.
you can align on that. I think that's super important because that will take you a long way. Alignment. I think the chemistry is super important. I wouldn't compromise on it.
The vibe check.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it will take you through the dark moments and dark nights as well. And I think then the values, like the conversation about the co-founder agreement and the values, that's it. If you are aligned on that, again, it will build the foundation of the
alignment,
house.
Chemistry, and the values. I think that's perfect. That encapsulates everything in terms of like work ethic, how you would approach conflict, how you would approach your relationship with each other also.
Because it will arrive.
Yeah.
But if you have a compass and you are aligned on the how you navigate through it, you will navigate through it.
So, when you read about how to find a co-founder, there's always like one should be the tech heavy one should be the marketing brain, one should be the strategy brain.
So the more complementarity.
And like even when investors are like, you look up Y Combinator and they're giving you this advice like how you should look for a co-founder. It's all very strategically written down, but is it that straightforward when you're looking for a founder? And is it always so straightforward? Because finding like a partner you have the alignment with, you have the values with, you have the chemistry with, and he's also tech, and he's also like fulfilling the missing pieces. How does that happen?
But that's why not everyone is also on that journey, right? Because it's not that easy also to find that complement. But I think if you give me the 4, that would be the 4th one. I think it is important. Because if you have the alignment, you have the vibe, and you have the values, but both of you want to lead, let's say, tech, and then there is no one to look after the people, no one look after the business, no one look after the product, you won't go far, right? So the complementarity in terms of like the focus areas, I think it's important. At least with some fluid edges. I wouldn't say that it has to be like, okay, you will forever be the product lead and you will forever be the chief operating officer. But as we said, what works for us is that we have areas within which we lead. And that is super important. And that is what gives also, the comfort to, let's say, investors or to our team, that when there is a conversation about legal, there is someone who can deep dive into it rather than having 2 co-founders who are just coming from a tech space but have no idea about how to build a business model or go to market strategy. So I think that's our 4th.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think my last question was, what piece of advice would you give to like founders looking for like the perfect co-founder? But I feel like this entire conversation has been one big like advisory session on like the ideal founder co-founder relationship. But like if you had to like give me a one-liner piece of advice on what it takes to be a good co-founder or what it takes to have a good founder relationship.
I think ability to talk with each other, and so the communication. Because whatever comes up, and if you don't bring it up and you keep bottling or you keep resolving it outside, you don't provide the feedback, you don't communicate, you don't talk, I think that's done. Business is done, right? I mean, I think that would be it. Is that the one thing, if there is a one thing, but for us, really, communication has been the golden piece for us that sort of, makes it for us.
Thank you so much, Vladimira. And I mean, I hope you could tell that I was genuinely enjoying this conversation and constantly interrupting you. I'm so sorry.
No.
But I was genuinely having this, like, I had a great time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on She Talks Business. We are regularly coming up with more episodes from London, Bali, and Dubai. Thank you for joining me. This is your Karachi host, Khizra Munir, signing off. See you next time. Bye.